Welcome to the Voices of Veterans podcast. My name is Dan Hamilton. I am delighted to be sitting down here with Zack Walker from the Defense Innovation Unit. Zack, thank you for being here and taking the time out to come talk to Texas veterans today.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
We have a whole lot of interesting topics to get into, talking about autonomy, artificial intelligence, the future of warfare. But most importantly, I'm going to read kind of what you have done over the last 10 to 15 years in your career. And I want to hear what you are most proud about that. So here we go. Zack has over 15 years of intelligence, cybersecurity, and cyber warfare experience as a military reservist, federal civilian, and government contractor. He has served in the National Security Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, Air Force, and Army, where he earned a Bronze Star for wartime service. So welcome, Zack. Tell us a little bit about what you hear when you hear that experience.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, it's great to be here. Well, when you say that I have over 15 years experience, the first thing I think is, well, I'm old. I don't know when that happened, but
it went by quick.
Yeah,
huh?
Suddenly I turned 35 and it's all gone downhill. No, when I think about that, I just think how lucky I am. How fortunate I am to be in a country where someone who grew up in a small town in Northeast Texas, pretty poor, single mother, the odds weren't necessarily good, but to grow up in a country to where, in a state where I can get a good education, have a chance to join the military, and have a chance to do some really interesting things in some really interesting organizations.
So what launched you from that small town with the single mother to now pursuing advanced degrees, extremely highly technical work? Was that something that you were always interested in? Was it something your mother pushed you towards? What was kind of the spark?
Well, it's funny. I was talking to someone about that recently, and I didn't actually know that college wasn't an option. Like, it just wasn't even in the radar that I might not go to college. It was just a foregone conclusion. And so I never had a chance to think that wouldn't be what I did after high school. And so I definitely thank my mom for that. Even though we grew up pretty poor, I mean, she certainly did the best that she could to try and give me every opportunity to have, so I could have follow a path that she didn't have a chance to follow when she grew up. So for me, going to college was definitely going to happen. Mm-hmm. The military certainly was not anything I had ever thought about doing. I actually remember when Gulf War I was happening in 1991, I think I was 7 years old. I remember my mom said that if I turned 18, we would move to Canada, so I wouldn't get drafted.
Really?
So that was the military perspective that I had growing up. But for me, I started college at UT Arlington when I was 17, and that was in the fall of 2001. And of course, that September was the 9/11 attacks. And I never thought about the military, of course. Didn't have anyone in my family, immediate family, that was military. And I just wanted to do something. And for me, it made the most sense at that time, when I turned 18 that December, to enlist in the Army National Guard.
So was it an immediate change for you, or was it a gradual change for you to decide to?
Pretty immediate. I mean, I was in college. I started off as engineering, which ended up not working out. It's okay to change. I've learned. It's good. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but after the attacks, I mean, again, it was my first month in college, right? It was a really, really transformative time, and I knew I was going to stay in college, and I wanted to have a degree and have the experience that you can only get from going to a 4-year institution. But I knew I needed to do something, and that I was at the right time in the right place in life. Again, I was very lucky. I had my health, right? I didn't have any real problems. There was nothing preventing me from enlisting, aside from a mother that would not be very excited about that.
And that conversation was?
Yeah, I don't think she was super excited at first, but she understood, right? I mean, she's always been one to not take away opportunities from me. And so when I explained to her what it meant, right, it was the National Guard. Of course, not really having a full understanding of what I was getting myself into. Not really knowing the military. This was before Iraq. This was really early on when just special forces were in Afghanistan. Knew that we would be doing something, but in all likelihood, if I were to be called up, since it was the National Guard, I assumed it would be natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, that kind of stuff. So I get to wear the uniform, get to go back to college, finish up, and then do something to serve. And it made sense.
So after you joined, did you have kind of an idea or a roadmap of what you wanted to do in the service? And how did that match up with what you actually have done?
Yeah, so I think I wanted to be a hacker. So the movie The Matrix had come out in 1999. I really wanted to be a hacker in the Army. I think I was about 10 or 11 years too early on that one.
I know.
It was a while before the Army established
that's really
that
flourished
as a job.
Recently.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I mean, if I could do it all again, I mean, enlisting to do some of these network operations jobs, it's just the coolest thing in the world to think, to be 18, to get that kind of experience and then be able to go back to school. But yeah, so that was an option. It was very important to me to only miss one semester in college. I didn't want to miss too much. And based on that, the recruiter gave me a set of jobs, and I just picked the one that sounded the most technical at the time. And it was the Texas Army National Guard, which is a little bit different than, well, certainly different than active duty because it's a part-time job. But it's also different than the Army Reserve because in the National Guard, you work for the governor in a sense as well. In case there is a natural disaster or some other kind of problem, you can get called up to work that way. So it was important to me as well to do that because I could also serve Texas in addition to serving federally if I needed to.
You have almost some local ties to your service as well as kind of a national desire to serve your country as a whole. Let me ask you this. What is, after you've kind of gone through the military, you've started to learn a little bit, you've gotten your degree, what was your approach to work after that? What was the approach to your career after you had, let's say, 4 to 5 years under your belt? What was a lesson maybe that you had learned either about yourself or about military service that kind of propelled you in the direction that you've gone?
Well, one thing that I figured out and I continue to try to figure out is just that military service and especially being in the reserves, right? So I've been a reservist since I was 18, so almost 18 years at this point. It unlocks almost unlimited opportunities, both personally and professionally. You just have to know how to take advantage of it,
right?
And it's something that unfortunately not everyone is able to do, right? It's one of those things you join the reserves and you realize what it can offer yourself, again, personally and professionally, to be able to serve, wear the uniform part-time, do some really interesting work, serve the nation when needed, and serve the state if necessary. And people either they love that, they appreciate how it fits in their life, and it lets them do interesting things they can't do otherwise. Unfortunately, some people don't have a great experience for a variety of reasons, and it doesn't necessarily make their life that much better, and they have kind of a bad taste in their mouth. And for me, I've just been very lucky in that I've been able to figure out how to find different ways to serve in the reserves, first in the Army and then in the Air Force, that were, one, needed at the time, but also aligned with both my interests, and so that it was a way it could kind of work together and benefit both sides.
So you actually touched on something that through these conversations I've heard a lot of the veterans sitting across me tell their story, is that there were opportunities where they were, but it took them a little bit of time to find it. And I actually think that specific quality in veterans is the ability to adapt to different situations and then exploit the opportunities. What would you say to maybe somebody who has gotten into the service or is maybe going to be leaving soon and is still in that adjustment process where they're trying to find their niche, or they're trying to exploit, like you said, the opportunities that are around them, but they're maybe having a little bit of difficulty? What would you say to them?
Yeah, it's hard. First off, I mean, it's very difficult to do, even for me. After I moved back to Austin after working in the agencies, after having a master's degree and allegedly a lot of real world experience, it was hard for me to figure out what I wanted to do next, because a lot of us that do this are very mission driven, that we want to have some kind of higher purpose, some higher calling, and even if we may complain about it sometimes because the work can be really
difficult,
frustrating. Just being able to serve a bigger picture is really important, and it's hard to get that from a company, right? And so certainly some do, but for me it was really important to find a company that I felt like would let me serve a mission without just working for the government in a different
Yes.
capacity. And
Yeah.
it's hard to find. And to be completely honest, I have yet to actually find that, right? Because I got
Right.
involved in the Defense Innovation Unit. So to answer your question, I say to someone that's in that situation, it's hard. It is extremely hard, and you shouldn't have to do it alone. There's many organizations with some really amazing people that have come up to try to help people in that situation find whatever the next thing is,
Right.
whether it's Bunker Labs for people in entrepreneurship, Vetted Foundation. There's a lot of different resources, both in Austin and across the state and nationally, that are there to help people really understand what it takes to make that next jump. And it really depends on what you want to get out of it. One thing that's you learn in the military is as you said, you constantly have to adapt to the challenge at hand. And that's been something that's been really interesting, I think, in our national discussions when we talk about artificial intelligence and taking jobs, and how this idea that you graduate from college at 22 and people thought, oh, I'm set for life now, right? Well, that's not true. And maybe it was true in the past, but it's certainly not true anymore. And it's very important for people to realize that you can't expect to not reinvent yourself and not
That's a good
get
point.
new skills and new opportunities. And veterans are really good at that.
That's actually an interesting point, because I think I think if you're talking to veterans who are leaving the service and they're going through a really culture clash, right, between what their military experience was, and then you said getting out of the service and trying to find something that's bigger than themselves. It took me, I think, a couple years, but what I found was, if you find an organization or a company or even a social group who is serving something higher than you, it really, at least for myself, it really aids in the adjustment to civilian life. But to bring this back around, in the reserves, you're spending a little bit of time in uniform, and you're spending a little bit of time in the civilian world, going to work on a day-to-day basis. Talk about the challenges of, to some degree, wearing two hats at once and transitioning between those different worlds.
It's a challenge. I mean, sometimes the challenge can be because it is just so different than what you do on a daily basis. And I remember when I was in college and I was enlisted in the Army National Guard. I remember I would go to class during the week in college, and then Friday afternoon at 4:00 I would have to make sure I shaved and put on the uniform and drive down to Waxahachie where my unit was. And who knows what was going to happen, but it was going to be so different than anything I had done the prior 28 days. Driving Humvees and setting up tents and the communications equipment I worked with, trying to do that, and it was just so different, and it was exciting, but at the same time it was very disruptive. If you go and do a field problem at Fort Hood for 36 hours straight, it makes class a little challenging that following
week.
So it's hard. And then when you are a bit older and you're out of college and you have a job and you have a family and you're balancing all these other competing priorities, it's really challenging. When I was a flight commander in an Air Force unit and I had a job at NSA on the side as a civilian, right, there's some overlap, but not a whole lot of overlap. And it's a lot of nights and weekends of doing evaluations and thinking about strategy. Relatively, for the most part, it's unpaid work you have to do, but it's what it takes as you spend more time in the reserves and get a bit more responsibility. You realize it's not just that 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year. It's a lot of time on the outside that you spend in. But again, you do it because you love it, and you do it because you understand it's not a perfect system. A lot of the reserve structure that we have was set up really after World War II, and this was this idea of augmenting the full-time force. And so when you look at it, there's some things that just don't really make sense in how it was, but that's really something that until Congress overhauls what they call continuum of service, it's still going to be a little strange in the way that it works out. And hopefully Congress does. It'd be great to think that it would be easier for someone to come into the reserves and serve part-time and serve in a capacity and be able to be, have a civilian job on the side as well.
Do you think that you would be at the Defense Innovation Unit if it had not have been for your military service?
Oh, not a chance. I wouldn't be at MIT now if it wasn't for my military service. I mean, it all goes back to every single thing that I've done as an adult, all goes back to December 13th, 2001, when I raised my right hand and swore to defend the Constitution. No question about it. Everything in my professional life has gone back to that day.
So bring the listeners up to speed then. Tell us a little bit about DIU, and tell us a little bit about what your either day-to-day or week-to-week life experiences with DIU?
Yeah, so Defense Innovation Unit, we're an organization that exists that works for all of the Department of Defense. So technically, we're part of the Office of the Secretary of Defense. And again, it's the details aren't necessary for this, but
Okay.
we're not working for a specific service. So I'm an Air Force guy, but I work for all of DoD. And our mission is to connect commercial technology with military problems and try to solve military problems using advanced commercial technology. And there's just, there's so much to talk about in that regard. It's anyone that's been in the military knows the jokes about, well, if something's military grade, that means it just doesn't work that well, or it's way too expensive, or anything like that.
It's really heavy and hard to hold. Or,
exactly, yeah. Why couldn't we just get an iPhone?
Yeah,
or just something that's commercial. And
Yeah.
that's, in a sense, in a very simple way, that's the reason that we exist, is because there's a lot of commercial technology that works really well. And for whatever reason, it's not in the military. Typically, that reason is we just make it so hard. These contracts, the bureaucracy, the process. A lot of these companies, you mentioned artificial intelligence and autonomy. Artificial intelligence companies, like that's really the hot thing right now.
Yeah,
and
it is.
if you have a good product, you have no problem raising money and getting customers, and you're not necessarily going to take the time to wait on a government contract and hire a federal sales team and learn these like 1,000-page documents. Right, you're not going to do that. You're just going to go make a lot of money in the private sector and solve problems in the private sector, and that's how it should be, right? You should be able to do that. DIU and other organizations like us, we offer a path for companies like that to work with the government, to work with the DoD, to actually, like, literally take your commercial AI algorithms and go in the motor pool up at Fort Hood and apply them.
Interesting.
And it works on both sides. And it's the most fun I've had in the DoD, and probably the most impact I've had.
So what do you enjoy most about it? What makes you excited about going to work every day?
There's a lot. I think the thing that makes me the most excited is when I see the impact of what we're doing. You mentioned a bit of my resume. NSA, CIA, Iraq, Pentagon. I like to joke that I've seen incompetence and dysfunction at almost every level of the government, and I've seen great things too. But you see these things, and you walk into these operations centers at NSA. You're like, that's it. Like, this is it. These are the people like protecting the entire
National
nation, right? I mean, they're great Americans. They're doing the best they can, but like, I thought it'd be like in the Matrix or movies or something, and it's crazy to see. It really is amazing, the scale when you look at competitors like China, where they put thousands and thousands of people toward problems, whereas we may only have like 10. Or in the case of DIU in Texas, one person that's doing it full time, and that's me. So it's really crazy when I am able to see these projects happen. And you see, for example, I mentioned this AI company. You have a $2 billion AI company that is making waves, doing amazing stuff in the private sector. You see them going in the motor pool at Fort Hood, applying their algorithms to make maintenance better and easier, knowing that we could possibly save billions of dollars, save time, possibly save lives. And just to see both on the DoD side, how excited they are to have access to technology that's so much better than what they've had, but then also to see the companies get almost emotional because they realize that they're playing a role in national security that they never thought that they could play before. And that's really what drives me, is helping people and companies realize that they have a part to play in national security, and that maybe they didn't realize that you can still have a company, have commercial success, but also contribute to national security.
So you are the lead for DIU here in Texas. What is the environment like for you here? Are you traveling a lot? Are you running around? Are people coming to you? What's the day-to-day like?
Yeah, it's all those things. So I work out of Capital Factory, which is a startup accelerator here in downtown Austin. And because of that, I'm able to plug into a larger ecosystem of innovation in Austin. And that's helped tremendously, just to be in the middle of everything. So startups and venture capital and nonprofits and other organizations, they come to me. I don't have to try to spend the time finding them versus being in an office building randomly somewhere in the city.
So what's the difference between DIU and the Army's Future Command that we've heard a lot about moving here into Austin? Is there Do they work together? Are there lines that are drawn in between the responsibilities for each one?
It's yet to be determined, honestly, and it's really exciting that history has yet to be written.
Mm-hmm.
Army Futures Command is the biggest change in the Army since 1973, right? And a lot has happened since 1973, right?
Yeah.
And for this to be the biggest change, I think is really remarkable. And for that to be in Texas is even more remarkable, that they put a 4-star. As far as I understand, it's the only 4-star in the United States that isn't on a military base. It was sitting over at the UT System building. I think I can
yeah,
see
I think it's
here,
actually
right?
might be right behind us, or right. Oh yeah, maybe it is right. Yeah, just south of us.
I mean, it's
just
just
south of us.
couple blocks away from Capitol Factory, and the fact that the Army is willing to put a 4-star in a non-military building, where he's walking around in a UT polo and shorts, and just talking to people about the importance of national security and modernizing the Army, like that is so amazing that we've done that. And for that to be in Texas, I think every Texan,
everyone benefits.
Every veteran should be really proud of what that means.
What is the problem, whether it's national security, artificial intelligence, what is the one problem that you are tackling right now that you want to fix?
Geez, how much time do we
have?
Yeah. The big challenge really is just unlocking access to the military and unlocking access to the private sector, so that we can get, again, anyone that's been in the military, I guarantee you, anyone listening that's spent more than a day in the military has had a situation where you're like, this doesn't make sense. Why don't we just do blank and just fill it in, whatever it is, right? We're here to try and give an answer to that, of like, well, the reason why we didn't do blank is because the best company that does that doesn't work with the DoD, and we can give them a path to do so. Or doesn't do blank because we put in these multi-$100 million contracts that were poorly designed with companies that really couldn't do the work, and we never made them deliver a good quality product. Therefore, that's why fill in the blank doesn't work that well. And so we're here to say, what is the best technology? What is the best product? What is the best solution for something that works in the commercial sector? Because if it didn't work in the commercial sector, then they wouldn't exist. They wouldn't have any customers.
So you really wake up every day almost trying to not solve a specific problem, but making sure that the people who can solve the problem are there.
Make sure
for the military.
Exactly. Make sure they have a way to work with the DoD. Make sure that they understand that there is a better path to working with the department that they may not have even realized. And making sure that the DoD is primed and ready to accept it. Take 5G as a good example. So we don't have any 5G projects. So just to be clear, and 5G really hasn't taken off yet. I mean, it's going to change the world, everyone says. But you could get 5G today in Houston through Verizon. It's commercial. I mean, it's a little different than what we expect to be 5G, but it's still technically 5G. Well, why do we have that in the military, right? And that's the kind of questions that we're here to ask is, if you could get it in Houston, why can't I get in the military? Or if I can have an iPhone that ties into iCloud and it all works, why can't I just or I have Gmail?
So is this as simple as saying that you're trying to make sure that a Marine or soldier in the field could almost like pull up an iPhone and call in a 9-line or call in a medevac or call in air support or something like that? That's what you're trying to do almost, right? You're trying to put the technology that's already out there in the palm of the hands of the warfighter.
Exactly.
I'm going to go in a little bit different direction. You are currently an MBA candidate at MIT. Talk to us about maybe the cultural difference that you've seen from there, from being at the Pentagon or NSA, and then being in a very either highly technical or highly academic environment. What do you enjoy about your time at MIT?
Well, I still can't believe that I actually go to MIT, even though I'm almost done. Every time I go there, I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And it's really, I wanted to make sure I got to this point as a lesson for any of the veterans that are listening, is to not undersell yourself. And the experience and the skills and the impact that you've had in the military and that you have as a veteran is truly invaluable. And I know that a lot of people talk about it, and it's almost a cliche to talk about that and how great veterans are, and we really want to hire them. But truly, I've met so many people, and myself included, that undersells themselves because we think that, well, I mean, MIT would never want me, right? I'm just this like Air Force guy. or that a certain company wouldn't want me, Facebook, Google wouldn't want me because I'm veteran. I mean, we are precisely the kind of people that these companies and institutions want.
Can I pause you for a second? I want to park here for a little bit. How did you use your military experience, or more importantly, how did you frame your military experience to MIT as a bonus for you? And how would somebody listening, if they're going, man, I'm a Texas veteran, I'm working on my resume, how do I make that value add to the company that I'm applying for?
For companies or for MIT?
For companies, for MIT. So I'll have you talk about specifically what you did for MIT that hopefully maybe somebody at home can apply those same principles at least.
So MIT is not paying me to say this. In fact, I'm paying them to say this technically. But and I feel a little cheesy for saying it, but the MIT, the business school's mission is to make principled, innovative leaders who will improve the world. Mm-hmm. That's it. I mean, what do you do in the military, right? I mean, you've said principles. It isn't very innovative because, I mean, look at it however you want. Either we're given opportunities to try new things, or the stuff we have just isn't going to work, and we have to figure it out. And that's innovation. And to improve the world, to improve national security, I mean, that's just what we do. And that is exactly what, understanding how special that is. I don't think a lot of veterans necessarily realize that you just don't get that in normal ways of growing up, going to school, getting a company. Not everyone is mission driven, and not everyone gets the kind of skills that we get through the military to be able to do that. And so again, for MIT, I didn't think I had a single shot. In fact, I had a call with someone that was in the program, and I expected them to be offended that I even called him to even think that I had a shot to get in, wasting his time. But basically like, Zack, no, what you've done in the military, the skills that you get, that's exactly the kind of stuff that they're looking for, and so I'm really glad I applied. I got in, and I think that lesson is something that should be something that's applicable for other.
I think it's interesting to point out too that you tried to do something that you weren't sure that you would be accepted to, and that's a critical lesson for, I think, probably anyone of any walk of life, especially for veterans getting out. But it is important, I think what you just highlighted, it is important to sometimes take a shot or find an opportunity that you think might be a little bit outside of your range. And that's basically what you said, right? I'm a little concerned about this. I have a little fear that maybe I won't get in. But there's still a lot of value in going through the process, right? And trying to pursue something that you're passionate about, even if you don't think, or even if it may be difficult to get into.
What do you have to lose? And like I said earlier, you don't have to do this on your own. I didn't do this on my own. I reached out through DIU, someone that was, kind of a second degree person that was in the program at the time, who was also Air Force reservist, and had the conversation. And again, if he had told me, "You're crazy, I'm offended you talked to me, don't even think about it," I honestly probably would have been like, "Okay, you're right, I'm sorry, I didn't want to do it." But of course he didn't. And I didn't do this by myself. And in no way, nothing that you do in the military you do by yourself, right? I mean, anyone that's been in knows that. And it's the same thing. I would think anyone that whatever it is that you think you're capable of so much more.
Yeah.
And you may not even realize it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think when you come out of the military, or even if it's somebody who has been working in one industry for so long, you almost end up pigeonholing yourself, right? You view yourself as, Sergeant Hamilton or Captain so-and-so or Lieutenant so-and-so, right? But when you get out...
Are you saying the TAPS program doesn't
yes,
set you up
exactly.
for...
Yeah,
wow,
exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Never heard that before. Yeah, it's hard, right? It's hard because the easiest way to say is, well, when I was enlisted, I was a 31R, which is a multi-channel transmission systems operator maintainer. Therefore, I should go set up cell towers. I mean, that's kind of what we do in the military. And
they think of it in a one-to-one correlation, right? When it's actually like one to whatever you want it to be.
Exactly, and it betrays the underlying skills for just the overt qualifications, right? And so yes, I set up cell towers in the military, but what does that actually mean I could do in the private sector? That kind of the softer skills or the other, critical thinking or kind of other things that you have to do. And that's a common thing is veterans will say, I had whatever MOS AFSC job code in the military, but I got out of the military because I didn't want to do that anymore. Right. I don't want to take the same job in the private sector because it's very hard to translate And I commend Google. I think I saw the Super Bowl ad. They just came out with this thing that takes your military job and translates it into civilian job. I think that's a huge step, especially if a good example of when commercial industry is coming in to solve a problem that the DoD clearly wasn't able to do on its own. But much more than that, taking another step to say, well, what are those skills? What are those special things that I got out of that MOS, that AFSC? Right. And then how could I leverage that? And that's hard. And again, you don't have to do it yourself. You shouldn't do it yourself, but it's hard to take that and translate that into the next thing.
So I think what you're actually doing, and this may not come across as blatantly as I'm gonna state it, but to me it's about creativity. It's about saying, okay, I have this in the Marine Corps, we called it MOS or whatever your unit designator was or whatever your job was. But when you get out of the service, you have to be creative about how you market yourself. You have to be creative about the opportunities you think you can apply for. And then just like you said, you have to be willing to fail, because the only thing that they can say to you is no. Would you view yourself as a creative person?
Yeah, maybe. I certainly can't draw to save my life or compose music or write poetry. I'm sure my wife wishes I
maybe
could
not
do that,
artsy, but
not artsy. But no, it's creative or innovative or maybe even sometimes the word opportunistic. It's got a bad connotation, but I mean, in a sense, you have to look and say, this is my situation. This is where I've been. This is what I've done. This is what I'm interested in. This is what the world needs. And then this is what I want to do. And there was someone explained it to me once, and hopefully I don't get this wrong, because I haven't thought about it in a while. But I think the concept it's called, I think it's like Ikigai, Ikigai.
Yeah.
And if I can remember it, it struck me when I first heard it, and I think it's something like you should strive to do something that you enjoy, that you're good at, that pays, and that the world needs. And that those are 4 things. And if you can nail those 4 things, you made it. A lot of people will get 2 or 3 of those things, think that they got it, and then wonder why they're miserable. Right?
Interesting. Yeah.
So something you're good at, something the world needs, something that, again, pays you whatever pay means for you to be able to live, and then something that will improve the world. And I think, which is why for me, I've been so honored and humbled to be a reservist for 18 years. For me, that hits all those boxes. And
being in the reserves does.
In general, for me, again, it's not for everyone. Yeah. Being in the Defense Innovation Unit, hands down, has all those boxes for me. And I think it's something that's important for people when they look at that next big thing. Again, something that you're good at, or maybe outside your comfort zone, but something you think you can get good at, and meets the other qualifications to really jump out. But also at the same time, know that you still have to reinvent yourself, and you still have to gain skills and experience and expertise. And just like people are warning of the AI apocalypse and everyone's going to lose their jobs, you can't think that the day that you ETS and you're done with the military is the last time you ever need to get new skills or transform yourself. You constantly have to do this. I didn't want necessarily to get a second master's degree. I was not on my radar ever to get an MBA at all. But I found myself in this job, and it was immediately apparent that I needed to get that training and that education. And so it's like, sorry, wife, this is going to be expensive, but we're going to have to.
This is what you need to do.
Yeah. So you have to have that spirit as well.
When you look back 5, 10, 15, even 20 years, are you where you thought you would be?
That's a great question. I have no idea where I thought I would be. 20 years ago, oh God, I was going to say I was hoping I was in diapers, but no, I was definitely...
About a teenager?
At least I wasn't driving yet, so at least there's some hope there. I was 15. No, I mean, 20 years ago, I was halfway through high school. I wanted to go to college and be a computer engineer. Again, didn't happen, but it was okay. 10 years ago, 2009, I just finished grad school, and I wanted to go work at the NSA and be a cyber intelligence analyst and do cool stuff. It changes all the time, and now I don't want to do either of those things. I don't actually know what I want to do.
I think it's actually a blessing, though, that it changes every time, right? Because I've always found that when you go in one door, even if it's not the perfect door, it can still lead you to a second one, or it can lead you to a different opportunity. And I always try to encourage veterans, hey, just take a step in one direction, right? Just pick a path, try the path out. If it doesn't work, it's not the end. Because a lot of these, guys and gals who are getting out here in Texas and leaving the service, if you're in your mid-20s or your mid-30s, you have a lot of life left to go. And so one of the most important things, and I think one of the most impactful things for veterans, and I think kind of what you just said, is you just took a step in a direction, and then once you got to that point and you said, hey, you looked around, maybe this isn't for me, and you took another step, and you've kind of progressed to the point where now you're at MIT. And before we talked on air, all those steps have progressed to the point where you're traveling overseas, you're working on business projects, and it really is about just putting one foot in front of the other, to where maybe you could have never imagined where you were, where you are now 20 years ago. But there are some themes that have gone throughout it, which is your interest, obviously, in technology, information systems, and if I'm understanding correctly, you have just allowed yourself to find opportunities and go pursue them.
Yeah, I think so. And I really can't overstate the fact that for me, being a reservist is the thing that always, it was like insurance.
Yeah.
In a sense. Like I knew that I could pursue what I wanted to do on the outside, whether it was grad school or work at the NSA or do whatever, but I always had something that I knew I could leverage, and if I needed to, either working full time with the military on something or getting a job leveraging my security clearance. Certainly that I'd be remiss to not say that being able to be in the reserves and maintaining a top secret security clearance is really invaluable to work in that space, of course, because it's very difficult to do. But yeah, I think another way to look at it is just looking at the whole picture and trying to say, again, that this is where I think I roughly am. This is where I want to go. Let's just try, right? Let's just step out and see what happens, and then reevaluate. Having a first kid next month.
Wow! Congratulations.
So, thanks. That's going to flip my world upside down.
Yeah.
So I mean, who knows, right? But I promised my wife after the kind of the dust settles, which maybe 18 years from now, I don't know, but maybe 6 months.
The dust is starting to rise.
Yeah, dust is rising. We'll sit down in 6 months' time, and we'll just evaluate and figure out, like, okay, this is the situation now. This is where we are. This is now we've had a kid. Like, what do we want? What makes us happy? Let's check in with each other, and go from there. I don't think I'm going to be getting any more degrees anytime soon.
Okay.
But if she does, or if she wants to do a new job, I mean, whatever it is, we'll figure it out. And you have to be able to reevaluate and reassess. But again, these are skills that you do in the military all the time.
Right.
You reassess the situation, you evaluate the situation, you make decisions based on the information you have at the time, and you're not afraid to change if you need to. And again, teamwork, it's nothing that you do by yourself. It's the same principles for that apply in life. And
we'll wrap it up here in just a minute or so. But for the audience who's listening and they hear MIT and they hear NSA and serving in the reserves for a long period of time, they may say he must be extremely smart, or he must have some sort of leg up on me. What would you say a challenge is that you've overcome during your career, or maybe something that you've run into that you've either had to learn to adapt with, personally or professionally, or that you've overcome?
Well, I would say that person, that is in no way the case, right? I am not better, smarter, certainly stronger than anyone else. It's just being able to see opportunity and then being willing to take a little bit of risk to go after it. Again, my story was written for me, right? As an only child of a single parent in Northeast Texas on welfare, like, there was a very clear path for where my life was supposed to go. And fortunately for me, my mother was not okay with that happening. And so, like I said, I didn't even know I couldn't go to college. I just thought it was like a law or something.
Right. Yeah.
And again, nothing about me is any different than what anyone else could do. Just getting educated, whatever that education is. And it doesn't always have to be college and grad school and super expensive MBA programs.
Yeah.
Whatever that is that's appropriate for you, that's in the right fit, whether it's a trade school, a certification, whatever that is. Constantly trying to get educated, constantly trying to improve yourself, constantly trying to think about the future and evaluating where you are now, where you want to get. I think as jaded and cynical as I may be, working in the government for so long, I think I truly am optimistic and leveraging that cynicism to try and always kind of look at where we've been in the past, but always have an eye toward the future, trying to move forward and make things better.
That's awesome. Well, I think that really kind of sums up looking forward to the future and trying to make it better. What you are doing currently at DIU, obviously what you have done in the past, and I think it's just a great message to send to our audience and send to Texas veterans here. So I appreciate you stopping by. It's been just a great conversation hearing about what you have been doing and then also what you're going to be doing in the future. My name is Dan Hamilton. Today's podcast is brought to you by the Veterans Land Board and Chairman George P. Bush. We look forward to talking to you next time.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. Follow us on Instagram at Voices of Vets, on Twitter at Voice of Veterans, and on Facebook at facebook.com/Voices of Veterans. To hear more, please visit voicesofveterans.org. Join us in sharing the success stories of Texas veterans. Thank you for joining us for the Next Gen Warrior Podcast.